Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And Kathy, if you'll just let people in as they come, that would be great. Okay.
Sure will. And I'm also adding it to the chat now, and I'll do it again later.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to welcome everyone to the inaugural Virginia Voices with co-host Kathy Haley, VP of the Northern Region of Poetry Society of Virginia, and myself, VP of the Western Region. As many of you know, Poetry Society of Virginia has launched its centennial celebration, which will culminate in our annual statewide festival in May of 2023. The Centennial Committee settled on a theme for our celebration, Virginia Voices, 100 Years and Beyond. Kathy and I started this series in order to get to know our members better by hearing their poetry, finding out what brought them to membership and what they've enjoyed about PSV and what their hopes for PSV as our community moves into its next century. On the second Wednesday of every month at 5:30 p.m. from now until May 2023, we'll gather here to ask our guests the same 3 questions. No doubt this will be an adventure as we hear some similar answers, discovering connections we didn't know we had, some perspectives we've never thought of yet. I look forward to this journey together, more really than I can express, as we are inspired, challenged, and reminded of why we came together in a poetry community to begin with, and the power we have as poets together. This hour is going to go really fast, so I feel like we definitely need to jump right in. Today, Kathy and I are welcoming poets Jorge Mendez and Kim B. Miller. Before I start Kim's bio, I want to praise it because we haven't even started this conversation, but when Kathy and I saw this bio, we both were like, we need to reconsider our bios. Like, who are we? What do we really want to say? So this is Kim's bio. Y'all want to take notes on this. Kim B. Miller's poetry is inspirational. Her words are bold, and she is unapologetically blunt. It always gives me chills. Kim is the Poet Laureate of Prince William County, Virginia, October 2020 to October 2022. She is the first African-American Poet Laureate for Prince William County. This award-winning spoken word poet was recently featured on Voice of America, VOA. Jorge Mendez is an author, musician, and spoken word artist based out of Hampton Roads, Virginia. He has been the standing host of the weekly Monday night open mic at the venue on 35th in Norfolk, Virginia since 2012. He currently serves as Vice President of the Poetry Society of Virginia, Southeastern Region, and works in various areas of the arts community in Hampton Roads. In 2015, he created Poet Fest 757, an all-day poetry festival held annually during National Poetry Month. Welcome. Audience members, I want to encourage you to use all the ways Zoom provides to interact with our guests today. We will be hearing them read poetry. We'll be hearing them speak from their hearts. And so please feel welcome to place your praise and thoughts in the chat or use the reactions at the bottom of your screen, but feel invited to interact. That's why we're here today, to connect. And I thought we would start with where PSV started, with a poem. So Kim, if you don't mind, would you please share first?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, of course, I'm arguing with myself as poets do. Which poem do I want to do first? Poet problems. I'll do the shorter one first, and I'll do the other one later. So this one is called Move Forward. When did you decide to take a back seat in your own life? You were never meant to live in your own shadow. I know the darkness can be enticing, your comfort level secure, your insecurities hidden, but you can't play hide and seek with pain. Pain will wait for you. Flaws are beauty marks on the road to greatness. Scars remind us that imperfections don't kill us. Missteps don't erase effort, but you can't succeed if you're transcribing judgment, blinking in doubt, hesitating instead of creating. If you feed sadness, how will joy grow? Stop waiting for opportunity to knock and go find her. Braille her with your vision. I'm not asking you to look at the glass as half full. I'm asking you to be grateful you have something to drink. Think about it. If you gave up every time you fell, you wouldn't be walking now. Break out of that self-imposed isolation. You lock yourself in hoping solitude would breed success. But your purpose waits to be discovered. While you Netflix and chill, your goals are on HBO, hope, basically optional. You made your situation your identity. You put a down payment on pain, but rented solutions. You're in a relationship with hours when you need to be dating seconds. Don't beg time to stay. Just use what you have before time does what it always does. Leave.
Mm. Thank
Wow.
you. Thank you, Kim. Pain does wait for you. Yeah, dating seconds, Erica. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, got to refocus now. The poetry always takes me somewhere, and I'm like, let me come back to the room. So Kim, now I'm like super excited to go to this. Your personal, one of the 3 questions for each one of you, your personal approach to poetry, because I could hear you all.
Yes, definitely. My personal approach is multifaceted, but I write on obviously what's happening today in life, in the news, things that are going on. I write about other people's pain because poets do that. A lot of people in the audience don't realize that just because the poem hits us doesn't mean it's our personal life. I do a lot of bad parenting poems, and I had 2 phenomenal parents, but I know a lot of people who didn't. So when I'm writing, I'm trying to get people to hear normally another perspective, 2, something they probably would have disagreed with me about if we were just having a conversation, 3, something that they'll take coming through the back door, but not the front. And and lastly, a fun, different way of saying something that they've heard 1,000 times. So I'm just trying to get people to, one, a blunt truth, or also a fun truth, but also to examine the possibilities that they have erased for themselves. Because sometimes we've heard negativity so long, we actually start to play the record ourselves. We actually fill in the lyrics ourselves. We blame fill in the blank for starting it, but now we're singing a new lyric. We're adding our own chorus to it. So when someone kind of brings that to your attention, it kind of jars you for a bit. So my approach to poetry is always thinking. I don't write poems that I don't want you to get where I'm coming from. There may be a couple that you may not get the references I'm making or get the metaphor or double entendre I was using, but ultimately you will have an idea and you'll take from that poem what I hope you took from it. 99% of the time I do not explain. I will never explain a full poem because I want you to take from it what you were supposed to take from it. As soon as I go, that poem was about this, then you say, oh, that's not me. Oh, that's not me. Oh, that's not me. No, let your poem speak for itself. Let it feed the soul it was supposed to feed. That's what I do or hope to do with my poetry.
Thank you, Kim. And that is what you do. That's what you've already done. We've only been together 14 minutes and you've already done it. Yeah. Absolutely. And I love something they would have disagreed with if we were having a conversation. Like that lens that poetry lends to its readers and its listeners. And so we're going to move right on to George and get George to start us with a poem.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm glad I'm here.
Thank you.
All right. Her spirit is a caged bird, singing muddy waters, howling her sorrows like a heartbroken harmonica. Her bloodstream has the blues. She is the band. She is every instrument and every musician. She plays her song with her entire body. When she hugs you, her arms twang like weeping banjo strings. Hollow bass echoes from the emptiest pit of her stomach, deeper and heavier than any hunger pain the world has ever heard. She carries her sin in a guitar case, handcuffed to her wrist, talks like a tormented tambourine, dances like a ribbon in the breeze, gracefully staggering to her melancholy melody, every painful note resounding from her delicate frame, and she swears that only she can hear it. She's singing fulsome prison blues, putting herself on trial. She is judge, jury, and executioner, throwing the book at herself, self-inflicting punishments for crimes she's not committed. She's imprisoned her heart behind the rusted bars of her fears, long since surrendering the keys to a reckless warden who lost them almost immediately with no spare copy. It's all anyone can do to break the locks. She is too far back in the darkness of her cell for the light in the hallway to reach her, but you can still hear her soul singing, swing low, sweet chariot, from beyond her penance penitentiary walls. You see, her bloodstream has the blues. Saxophone sadness wails from her windpipe. Troubles flood from her eyelashes in a trumpet of tears, but it's all just tarnished brass. The trombones slide in tension and the heartbeat keeping rhythm gets faster and faster and faster until it starts to sound more like a funeral march in the Big Easy. But this was never easy because her spirit is a caged bird singing muddy waters. But I requested Etta James at last.
Yes. Thank you, George. The way you used music, and it became music, and the sounds, the heart, the howling heart, broken harmonica, the talks, tormented tambourine. And here was the other thing I kept thinking when I was listening, is how much in so many ways your poem was in conversation with what Kim was talking about, an approach to poetry, and how those two things were converging. And it was amazing. And so that's a great moment to move into your personal approach to poetry.
So it's kind of a hard question to answer. I don't know if I have an overall broad general approach to poetry as an art form, but I approach every poem as its own individual thing. So the form of poetry that I mostly do is what we call spoken word. Spoken word poetry is just poetry that refuses to stay on the paper. It's just poetry that demands it be heard out loud. And every spoken word poem is a moment in a lifetime. So I try, once I've written a poem and I've gone through that experience, I kind of stick that experience in a backpack, so to speak, and I carry that experience into my next poem. And I try to carry that. So if you were to go back to my very first elementary school poems, God forbid, you can kind of see the progression, not just in my life, but also in my writing. I think I hope. My approach to the art form itself, I've got a great respect for it. I've been writing my entire life, mostly to process feelings and emotions and things that I was experiencing, especially in my younger life. I suffer from depression and anxiety, but before I had that diagnosis, it was a lot of, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? Why am I sad for absolutely no reason? You know, when you suffer from clinical depression, there's chemicals in your brain that trigger when you're happy, just like when you're sad. Your brain can get sick just like any other organ. But growing up, I didn't really know that. And I just very much internalized a lot of self-anger and writing, whether I was writing a comic book story to escape or writing poetry to express or writing a horror story to execute, right? I was writing, and I've been writing since I could pick up a pen, really. I know that sounds like the stereotypical thing that all writers say, oh, I've been writing since I was a child, but I quite literally have. My mother says that before I could actually write words, I would write with pictures, and I would like read her the stories based off of the pictures. I think it's just something that I have to do. So
I don't think there's anything stereotypical about you, George, first of all. So I have to say that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you just listening to both of you. I mean, I find myself, I'm like, don't start crying now. You're the one who's supposed to be leading this, you know, because it's just so moving to hear people share and to hear, like, even saying, you know, the poems that you write demand to be heard out, are the ones that demand to be heard out loud, and hearing how you feel about that, and then the way that you articulated, whether it's for escape or expression or execution, made that action that so many of us engage in a tangible thing that we can now talk about. And I think that's what poets do. And I'm really grateful for that. Okay. So I am going to move right into the second question, and then we'll do a poem, and then the last question, then we'll close with one. But if you don't mind just continuing on, George, answering this question, what prompted you to join the Poetry Society of Virginia, and how has it made a difference to you, if it has?
So when Jeff Hewitt was still president, Jeff and I were very, very good friends. Jeff published my first book. He's very much a mentor figure to me. Him becoming vice president and then president kind of prompted me to sign up. After his passing, I kind of fell out of love with poetry and art altogether. I went through a really difficult processing phase. I had never lost anyone close to me in my life before him. Not a grandparent, not a relative, nothing. So not only was it difficult to process his loss specifically, but this new barrage of feelings that came with this new thing I was experiencing called grief, right? So I say all that to say, after his passing, I let my membership elapse. Fast forward to March, Kendra, who I've known a little bit for a little while now, who was the former VP of the Southeastern region, was ready to step down, and she recommended me. So as humbling as that was, I hopped on, and here I am. I've only been around for a couple months. I really, really, really am thankful to be a part of it, and I'm hopeful that I can bring something worthwhile to the table. My main goal right now being to kind of marry these two worlds, right? So far, we've kind of had the Poetry Society and we've had the spoken word community, but there hasn't been a whole lot of intersectionality there. And that was, so I don't know how many people are familiar with it yet, but I've started doing a monthly open mic at the venue on the first Sunday of every month. That's free to PSV members, where I'm hoping to bring our PSV membership body, as well as the spoken word and the slam community under the same roof, so that those of us who are like, well, what's spoken word? Is it the same thing? Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. All the same literary devices and techniques are used. So I think our community as spoken word artists could benefit greatly from the Poetry Society being in their lives. And I think the Poetry Society could benefit greatly from having our involvement too.
Agree. In the chat, there's lots of agreement for you. Yeah. So, Kim, I cannot wait to hear your answer to this question. What brought you and what do you think of your experience?
Well, for me, it wasn't a what, but a who, and she happens to be here. And her name is Kathy Haley. So that's how I found out about it. I was like, you know, sometimes when you're busy doing other stuff, you don't know about all the great associations that are out there. And Kathy told me about it. She said, you should join, look into it. And I kept saying, okay. And then she sent me the link. So she's like, okay, I'm gonna get you. You're not gonna listen? Okay, I'm gonna send you the link so you can't say you didn't know where to go. So I looked up the link and then I had minor trouble signing up. But anyway, so that's how I got associated.
It's a wonder we got you, because the website was not cooperating for the memberships during that particular period of time. And so thankfully it's back running again.
Yes, it's the hyphen name syndrome. So I think that's what it was. But, you know, finally got there and have enjoyed it ever since. Like George was mentioning the differences between the poets and the spoken word poets. I mean, there is a difference, but the difference, as I tell poets all the time, it doesn't mean it's a negative difference. It's okay to be different.
Right.
It's okay for you to decide that you're a poet. And for those of you who don't know the distinction, so basically a poet reads their poem. They're not doing a lot of inference and a lot of volume changes in their voice. They're basically reading it. A spoken word poet is supposed to make you feel their poem. So it's supposed to be changing voice, inferences, different pronunciations, loud points, quiet points, whatever way they decide to read it, but there has to be a difference in the reading. And slam poet normally is a spoken word poet. Also, they just compete in their poetry and they have a certain amount of time to compete. Haiku, yes, they have haiku performing. They call it death match. I don't know why they came up with that. Anyway, so that's what they call it when you're competing in haiku slams. They call them death matches. And those aren't timed, but you know, you still can't be up there all day. But those aren't timed, so that's how the competition goes. Now, since there's poetry police, for those of you who have never encountered them, hey for you. But the poetry police are the ones who come through and go, that's not a haiku because blah, 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 blah. You're not a poet because blah, blah, blah. You're not a spoken word poet because blah, 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 blah. You are whatever you decide to be intuitively. However, if you're going to call yourself a spoken word poet, they're going to look for that sort of inference and different reading when you present your poetry. Nothing wrong with being a poet. This is not a competition. One is not better than the other. They're just different. But I would just explain to poets to know what you're claiming yourself to be. Because if someone hires you as a spoken word poet and you're basically reading it, they're not going to be happy campers. But if you told them beforehand that you were a poet, you go and be as poety as you want to do it. There's nothing wrong with being a poet. I just need that distinction cleared up. In the poetry police, no one asked for you.
Thank you. No one did. Yeah. So I love this because, like, I mean, from their bios to their poems to their answers, like, there's y'all are just present in everything you say and everything you bring. We have George with like this immense vulnerability that he gifts to us, And then we have Kim, this educator, I mean, and so everyone may not know, but she is an educator. And then she is an educator. Like, do you hear it? Do you hear how she teaches and how she leads? And I mean, it's just incredible. Okay, so as we move on, thank you all both so much for being you and for being here. Kim, would you give us the next poem? Would you start us off with that? Okay.
Absolutely. This one's a little longer, but I'll try to find places to shorten it. This one is called Women Are Flowers. Can you walk with me? Can you slowly stroll with me in this beautiful garden? Beautiful. Do you see the flowers? They are flooding every part of your vision, crowded together like blades of grass, yet separate, distinctive, like Mother Nature's wallpaper. A gentle breeze brushes loose petals. They are gliding quietly to the wet ground. You smile and invite their fragrance to linger inside your imagination. The aroma of flowers you have never heard of is surrounding you. So many colors, the rainbow expands on each stem. There are touches of pastels penetrating hues that fought the stem to expand its palette. It doesn't matter what depth of color the flower holds, they all seem to be dipping into sunshine. Some are slightly smaller, but you are not looking for imperfections. You're only looking for the beauty in their existence. That is what a beautiful garden does to our senses. It transports us. We focus on the collective beauty of nature. So, if you could just stop comparing women, because we are flowers. We just bloom in different gardens. Some of us have thorns, some don't. Some of us use our thorns for self-protection. I wonder why we need that. Why? Why do we have to step into this deep dirt to become the beautiful, radiant flowers that we are? The beauty is simply the flower itself. No one goes into a garden to destroy it. They go to admire the scenery. The simplistic beauty is something not tainted. Remember that the next time you see a woman blooming in her skin, trying to expand her reach. You don't have to bother her. You don't know what baggage she's carrying. Respect goes far. Even a drop of hope, like a drop of water, can nourish her. The different fragrances that make up women. What a beautiful garden. We just ask that you respect the whole flower. Respect the stem. If you cut us, don't we bleed? Stop trying to put us in that vase. We can't be so restricted. We're not limited to what you think we should be. Sitting in that vase, neatly in place, looking pretty. Can't we be who we're meant to be? Don't you want the little flowers, the daughters, the granddaughters, to see the flowers blooming and say, wow, that's what it's like to be a woman, to be admired and valued? Every petal counted. Every petal counts. Every stem beautifully admired. Not looked at for what size it is or what size it isn't. Some flowers have planted seeds and we water them. And sometimes you water them. But what are you watering these emerging flowers with? Is it love and acceptance? Is it growth? What do you want these little flowers to become? They mirror what they see. The roots of these little flowers are like sponges. They absorb the dirt, the soil, the fertilizer, the lies, the stereotypes that you throw at them. If you want to see a beautiful flower, a beautiful woman. Let her be who she's supposed to be. Don't try to define her. Let her walk in her grace. Let her walk in her purpose. Let her be who she wants to be. Pants, skirt, straight hair, curly hair, multicolored hair. Who cares? She's still beautiful. She's still strong. We're all in this dirt together, us women, in different flower beds, looking across at each other, knowing that we are a sisterhood. We feel it. You try to divide us based on color. You try to divide us based on size. We don't play those games anymore. The sisterhood is growing strong. We look at each other and we feed each other now. So when you come with your fertilizer of hate, we don't absorb it anymore. We just say there must be a weed that needs to be removed from our garden. You don't get to speak for flowers anymore. We can speak for ourselves. We will not allow you to hold us back. We will bloom the way we like. If we stretch out and hit sidewalk or glass ceiling, it won't be the first time we grew beyond the limitations that were set for us. Have you ever seen a flower grow in a crack and thought, how did it get through it? A woman pushed it. A woman fed it. A woman gave it a route. A woman gave it a root. We're not asking you to agree. We're just asking you to leave the garden, the flower the way it was. We don't have time to waste. So if you want something else, then keep walking. We're looking for someone who admires flowers, not judges them. We're looking for someone who's ready for a flower and all it encompasses. So if you're not ready for a woman, don't drag her down in the dirt. We already came through that. Let the flower breathe. Let the garden grow. And if we're too much of a strong fragrance for you, then no, we're not the flower for you. But we're going to grow anyway. Don't you dare pick a flower that you aren't ready for.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you. I feel like I lost George for a minute. So yeah, you should read the chat, Kim, because you were speaking to us. Yeah. And we were listening. Thank you. Thank you. I keep having to recenter myself. So Kim, I feel like that is because of this poem and what you're saying in it and how you're leading and lifting. It's really a good moment to find out what you want for Poetry Society of Virginia as we move into our next 100 years.
Good question. Pretty much like George said, I would love to see the marriage of poetry and spoken word poetry. Slam poetry is a whole nother animal, so I don't know if you can marry those two together, but I can see how poetry and spoken word poetry could easily form together, especially minus the poetry police, as we discussed earlier. I would love to see people a diverse hue, because with diversity comes different perspectives. With perspectives comes learning. With learning comes giving. And you can never learn more than the knowledge you already have, the knowledge you're already willing to get. And I think as we expose ourselves to more people in different diverse patterns, we learn more about people, and we get that honest feedback that we get without even knowing we're getting that honest feedback, because the world will paint people a certain way. But when you interact with people every day, that skews the script you've been given. So then you have the opportunity to say, wait a minute, that script is not exactly right, because I know so-and-so. And it's not the same, I have a Black friend, or I have a Latino friend, or I have, not that. But it means that you're exposed to different views. And when you're exposed to different views, you get the opportunity to ask that person something. Because I'm an open book. I tell people, if you want to ask me something, ask me. And especially, you know, even women versus men, for them to get an opportunity to interact with women to see, well, how do we feel about this? Why are we so, you know, adamant about this? And normally when I have a man who's like, that's absolutely ridiculous, you don't know what you're talking about. And normally I say, are you a dad? And if they are, oh, well, got you now. Okay, really? So if I understand you correctly, you want your daughter to sit quietly and not be heard. Oh, no, I raised my daughter. Oh, well, how is she supposed to see that and feel that and know it's normal if she never sees it illustrated? She can't be, she could be a one-off. Everything is impossible. Everything is possible in life. She could be a one-off. But what you really want to do is for her to see examples of it almost everywhere she goes. So that's normal. When she says, I don't want to do that, stop. That, hey, I heard so-and-so say that. It's very familiar. No is a complete sentence. I don't have to go into a soliloquy each time I don't want to do something. So I think people being exposed to people and giving people an opportunity to say how they feel honestly and not take it personally, just hear them out. And then hopefully the person is open enough to allow questions so people can get on equal footing. But a lot of times, it's not that the person is, sometimes they're just totally wrong. You know, let's call it what it is. But sometimes they just need education on another view. And sometimes it's being exposed to someone who's different from that person. So diversity and open conversations, which will be difficult, but very helpful, because we can't ask the world to encompass it and then sidestep it in poetry. Poetry is supposed to be truth. So if there's some issues in poetry, if someone who is Native American, African American, Caucasian, whoever it is, woman versus man, whatever it is feeling uncomfortable, poets and poetry should be discussing that. It shouldn't be a taboo subject and we act like everything's great. Well, if everything's not great, it's okay, but we as poets can talk about it.
Yeah. I appreciate so much of what you said, and I don't want to take up too much time with my voice, but I do want to say that and say that I feel like poets, because we spend so much time with language, right, with like every word choice, you know, every word is carefully chosen. We can hear that when we hear the poems. That I feel like we are not the only ones to be having the conversations, but we at least should be having the conversations. We at least should be the ones finding the language to have those conversations. And I just want to speak to one more thing you said, and that's a lot of my first collection is about a lot of abuse that is based in gender, and it was, I wrote it wanting to give voice to my experiences and to other women's. But what was so moving was when men read it and reached out to me and said, I didn't know. Like, I didn't know that's how girls felt or women felt, or, you know, now I know how to be a better man. And that was never my intention. But it really turned out to be the biggest gift. And I feel like that's what I hear you saying. And yes, absolutely yes. Okay, I'll be quiet. And we'll go to George, because I'm so glad you came back, George.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I was experiencing some technical. I had to switch devices. My Wi-Fi went out. I don't know what happened, but sorry about all that.
And you made your way back. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
I was able to weasel my way back in.
Yeah. Will you read us a poem, please?
Absolutely. So I have my fourth collection coming out sometime in the fall called Poems I Stole from My Imaginary Friends. And this is from that collection. My friends and I have sat here together, hours at a time, in complete silence, just trying to figure out which one of us is the imaginary one. But I use the term friends loosely. I mean, we know each other, but only in passing, the way salt knows ocean air. Most times I can barely even make out their faces, whether it's in a mirror or a window or a puddle. One looks like the boss, though. Clearly he's the one in charge, or at least he thinks he is. Stern, intense, feigns strength for the sake of the others. He's holding a clipboard, I'm not sure what he's writing down, but I can hear the pen grinding against the paper. It sounds furious, like voices in broken homes, like breaks at the last minute. He screams at the top of his lungs, not because he's angry, but because he's terrified. I pretend to not know that. Then there's the hopeless romantic who loves as if he knows his life depends on it, loves even when against his own best interest, his heart on his sleeve, battle-worn, decorated with puncture wounds, defiantly still beats, loudly, profoundly, undeterred, and fully prepared to pour itself out again and again and again and again. There's one who keeps his face hidden, only shows me the top of his head, eyes fixed to the ground, admires his feet, wonders where they'll take him. He looked up once but couldn't handle the glare, keeps his eyes covered these days. But that doesn't seem to keep him from seeing. He's just learned to be selective of what he allows to catch his gaze. He's quiet, not silent, and prefers to absorb rather than to expel. It's been said he thinks too much. He never understood what that meant. Another smiles like he knows the punchline to a joke I haven't told. Laughs much too late. Doesn't seem to take anything seriously. He's both the jester and the butt of the joke. He just snickered because he heard me say but. Sometimes he's too much. Sometimes not enough. The girl is loving but fierce. Blade of grass, springtime sharp. She is the advocate, the voice of reason, the wailing cry for justice, blanket guardian, the strongest one among us. She feels the deepest because she's been through the most. They say all men have a feminine side. Mine just so happens to wear the pants. I believe she will be the one who saves us. The youngest one is my favorite. Sings out of key, doesn't care, just sings louder. Wears a towel around his neck. It's where he gets his powers from. He lives in a blanket fort where the walls are impervious. He tucks me behind the sheets, holds my face in his tiny hands, and tells me that as long as I stop growing up, I'll be safe here. He makes drawings of the rest of us, all of us with the same face. He draws me holding a tissue, but wearing a towel around my neck.
Thank you, George. Thank you. Last question. The next 100 years, what do you envision for us at PSV?
For the next 100 years, I believe we'll all have notebooks permanently implanted into our palms. We can just peel back a layer of skin and write a new poem. Really just wear it on us. Literally wear it. No, with any luck, the Poetry Society will still be around. The art form will still be around. So I believe that poetry is an art form of necessity, right? I think it's very necessary. We need it for a societal voice, for an emotional release. So while I hope that it still exists, it would be a little sad also that if in 100 years we still need these artistic vices, right, to get us through the darker moments. So maybe poetry in 100 years will take a happier turn. I'm a bit of a nihilist. I genuinely feel that humanity will go extinct before we ever learn to actually work together. So I don't know. Maybe I'm being idealistic. It'd be nice to think that poetry is still around and we're all walking tame tigers on leashes or something. But who knows that we'll be here in 100 years. But if we are, hopefully we're all still writing.
Thank you, George. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think I'm going to be processing this conversation for a very long time. And it is very much like meeting what my desires were for this. Kathy, what your desires were for the conversation too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the fact that we started with this marriage of spoken word and page poetry is actually a place we've been wanting to go in our conversations. We've been wanting to do more of that, and I'm really excited to see the strength of your passions about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And diversity and awareness of lenses and awareness of the power of poetry. And I mean, you've both really spoken to my spirit, and I'm incredibly grateful. And it makes me excited for the next 100 years. Although I definitely will not be here for the entire 100, but I hope to make it for as much of it as possible. So, but I wanted to, we've got pretty much a perfect amount of time left to finish up with, I feel well fed too. I agree. And there's definitely chats going on. But if we can finish up with a poem from each one of you. So Kim, I think you started us off. So if you'll start us off with this one, and then George will send us home.
All right.
All right. So I'm going to do some haiku. So for those of you who don't know what haiku are, they're super short poems. Started in Japan. Both of these are beautiful Japanese art forms, these poetries. I said, yes, you'll hear me say words that are not grammatically correct. These poetries. This poetry. Haiku is both singular and plural, just a little FYI. So it's not just things haikus, haiku. Original haiku are only on nature, 17 syllables, 3 lines. There's also something called a senryu. Same exact thing, 3 lines, 17 syllables, any subject. Haiku, nature only, very specific way to write it. Senryu, a lot more openness on how to write it, still 17 syllables. Both Japanese poems. Now, in the performance poetry world, we call them both haiku, just like we call both a palm and an oak a tree. We don't make that distinction. I just want you to know the distinction. And before each one, I say haiku because I like to. Again, that's not mandatory either. So, haiku. Stop talking about cutting people off. You know your knife ain't that sharp. Haiku. How much blood are you willing to lose to make those red flags you ignore? Haiku.
Nice.
Strong women are not unbreakable. We just know you ain't the hammer. Haiku. If your pain runs deep, why is your response so shallow? Read that again. Haiku. You cannot divide yourself into fractions to make someone else whole. Haiku. You betray loyalty with lust, and now you want lust to be loyal. Haiku. It's okay to be scared. Do it anyway. Scared people succeed too. Haiku. You were looking for someone powerful. I just showed you your mirror. Again, haiku. You were looking for someone powerful. I just showed you your mirror. And I always tend to end on this one because it's one of my favorites. Haiku. They thought they broke you, but you're a glow stick. They just exposed your light. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Bring it home, George.
Before I read my poem, Kim, those were amazing, all of them.
Thank you.
Welcome. Excuse me. This is the last poem in my first book, Keys and Crowbars. It's called The Nature of Things. So I think that deep down, most hammers would much rather be pillows, with a preference to rest ahead than to strike one. I have a rough time believing that sandpaper wouldn't prefer to be satin. You see, I think some of us act harder than we need to, simply because we haven't been presented with the options. Given a choice, I'd like to think that any barrier would much rather be a gate, swung wide open, like arms that haven't seen you in years, saying, come on in, welcome home. You made it. So here's to every wish that drowned because its penny couldn't swim. For every rainbow that ever bent over backwards, reaching for the sun every time the sky cried, and for any shamrock that perished with its wishes, still trapped within its 4 leaves, cut down prematurely by a lawnmower blade, whose only wish was to be a sprinkler head instead. See, this is for being better than our nature, for going outside of our means of becoming more than what we were made for. This is for the understanding that sometimes a crowbar just needs to be a key. And sometimes a lock needs to just not exist anymore. Trust me. There are pebbles that dream of being boulders and boulders that dream of being feathers. Okay, somewhere, right? There's a puddle with ocean aspirations. And today, maybe today he's just a puddle, but tomorrow he'll be a pond. And the day after that, a brook, and then a river, and then a stream. And then one day that ocean that will become the raindrops on a 4-year-old's nose who's jumping into a puddle, pretending to be a giant, splashing in an ocean. Everything is cyclical. So here's to the nature of things, and to the cycle of order, and to the knowledge that all things have a purpose beyond their purpose, especially you. Cheers.
I'm speechless for a moment, but I know I need to say something because we all need to go. But I just don't think it could have been any better of a beginning than it was tonight. And we have Kim and George to thank for that. And I hope as we come together on the second Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. of every month from now until May 2023, we'll look around this room, we'll see these names, and then we'll see them again and again. And we'll begin to build that community through that recognition and that familiarity, and through all the ways that y'all converged, and that I felt myself converging with you, and I saw people in the chat connecting with you. And I cannot thank you enough. This is the first time since I joined Poetry Society of Virginia that I have felt like I was part of the community that I joined to be part of. And I am incredibly grateful to everyone who came tonight, the ones who had to leave early, the ones who could stay the whole time, to Kim, to George, and to Kathy. Kathy has been my bestie since the beginning of me coming into PSV. And I would not have survived to be here at this moment and share this time with you without Kathy. So I just want to thank y'all. I thank you very much. And if everyone wants to unmute and just give a shout out of praise to Kim and George for being here tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
This is lovely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for tuning in.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. We'll see y'all again.